All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack this incredibly powerful ancient argument that's designed to build a faith that just won't quit. It comes straight out of the third chapter of the book of Hebrews. And it's this fascinating comparison between two of the heaviest hitters in history, Jesus and Moses. See, the author was writing to people who were getting tired, they were losing heart, and the solution they offered was, it was all about a radical shift in focus. And the whole thing really boils down to this one question. Why on earth would you compare a servant, even the greatest servant who ever lived, to a son? This simple little analogy is the key that unlocks the entire chapter's message. It shows us exactly why one is worthy of our ultimate, unshakable trust. So where does this argument start? Well, it doesn't begin with a dusty history lesson. Nope. It starts with a direct command. It's this urgent call to action, and it's aimed right at our minds and our hearts. And here it is. The instruction is to consider Christ Jesus. The author is essentially telling these discouraged believers, and by extension, you and me, that the antidote to a shaky faith isn't just gritting your teeth and trying harder. It's about looking in the right direction and really thinking about who Jesus is. Now that word, consider, it's a really big deal. In the original Greek, it's katanoein. And that doesn't just mean taking a quick glance. Oh no. It means to fix your attention on something, to analyze it, to drill down until you get its inner meaning and the lesson it's trying to teach you. This is a call for some serious, focused meditation. Okay, so what exactly are we supposed to be considering about him? Well, the text gives us two very specific titles that pretty much frame his entire identity and his work for us: apostle and high priest. First up, he's the apostle. The best way to think about this is like God's ultimate ambassador. If God had one final definitive message to send to all of humanity, a message so important it absolutely could not be messed up, he sent it through Jesus. He is the Father's #1 most important messenger, period. And second, he's the high priest. Now, this is kind of the other side of that same coin. If the apostle is God coming to us, the high priest is our representative going to God. He's the ultimate mediator, the one who stands perfectly in the gap for us. So once those two huge roles are established, the author gets to the main event, this central analogy. And this is where the big comparison to Moses comes in, using this really powerful picture of a house. But first, you gotta notice this. The text doesn't tear Moses down just to build Jesus up. Not at all. It gives Moses the highest possible honor, calling him faithful in all his house as a servant. And let's be clear, Moses was without a doubt one of the greatest, most faithful leaders to ever walk the planet. His integrity was legendary. But here's the pivot. Here's the crucial point. The logic is so simple, but man, is it profound. The person who built the house always gets more honor than the house itself, or any part of it. This just brilliantly lays out the difference between their roles. So the comparison really breaks down like this. Moses was a faithful servant in God's house, but Jesus, he's the faithful son over God's house. That's not just a different job title, right? That signifies ultimate authority, ownership. You could say Moses was a revered resident, a crucial part of the amazing structure of God's people. But Jesus is the architect, the builder, the owner of the whole shebang. The difference isn't just a matter of degree. It's a completely different category. And then bam, the author brings it right back to us. He says we are that house, if. And that's a big if we hold on. True belonging, he's saying, is proven by perseverance. It's a challenge to see our faith not just as a one-time decision, but as a lifelong commitment to the one who built the house. Now, this isn't just some abstract theological exercise. This whole comparison has a really urgent, practical point, which the author drives home with a pretty stark warning pulled right from Israel's own history. He quotes Psalm 95, and it's this powerful, sobering command. Today, do not harden your hearts. That word today is absolutely critical. It screams urgency. The voice of God isn't something you can just put on the back burner until tomorrow. And the warning is against repeating a very specific, catastrophic failure from the past. So what was that failure? It was that rebellion in the wilderness. You had a whole generation rescued from slavery in Egypt. They saw God's miracles for 40 years, but when it came to the critical moment, they refused to trust him to enter the promised land. Their journey started with this incredible act of faith, but it ended in unbelief. And the consequence, well, it was devastating. So what was the root cause? Why did this entire generation, who saw so much with their own eyes, fail to enter God's promised rest? It wasn't because their enemies were too strong or because the journey was too hard. It all boiled down to one specific internal failure.
And that failure is the central warning of this entire chapter. The absolutely devastating danger of a heart that gives in to unbelief.
Now, let's be really clear about what the text means by unbelief. This isn't about intellectual doubt or not being able to wrap your head around some complex idea. The source defines it as an unwillingness to trust. It's a choice. It's an act of the will. The text doesn't treat it like some unfortunate circumstance. It calls it a serious sin that comes from an evil heart.
So what's the antidote? How do we keep our hearts from getting hard like that?
Well, the text gives a surprisingly practical solution.
Community. Exhort one another daily. See, the fight against unbelief is not a solo mission. It requires daily, mutual encouragement to keep our hearts soft and ready to hear from God.
Because here's how that hardening happens. It's through what the text calls the deceitfulness of sin. Sin is sneaky. It doesn't just show up and announce its destructive power. First, it lies to you. It promises something good it can't deliver. Then it starts making excuses for itself, whispering that it's no big deal. Over time, that process hardens your heart, making you less and less sensitive. And finally, it pulls you away from God, creating the very unbelief that this chapter is screaming at us to avoid. Ultimately, the big takeaway is that genuine faith is proven by its endurance. I mean, the Israelites had a fantastic start when they crossed the Red Sea, but they didn't finish the race. So the crucial point, the ultimate evidence that we are truly part of God's house, is that we hold on, steadfast, all the way to the end. And this whole thing leaves us with one final, very practical question. If the antidote to a hard heart is to exhort one another daily, then it kind of begs us to ask ourselves, who is my one another? Who are the people in your life that you are intentionally encouraging, and who is encouraging you today?